You put the probability of life arising spontaneously from non-life at about 1 in 10 to the 2,930. First of all, do you have an example of how impossible this is from a probability standpoint?
Wow.
It's
And,
so big
and
that you can't come up with a valid example.
it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically impossible. Like what I'm going to describe to you is just vastly more likely to occur than that event. Consider a junkyard, miles wide. It's got lots of parts and stuff, and a whirlwind comes into that junkyard and spins and it pulls a bunch of parts and they shape themselves into.
I'm thrilled you're here with us on the Christian Clinician, where we join faith with evidence-based medicine to revitalize your health and renew your faith. Get ready for real and informative conversations with wellness experts and Christian scholars alike to gain a deeper understanding of our faith, explore our God-given purpose, and discover how the strength of our relationship with God can impact our health here on earth.
Welcome to another episode of The Christian Clinician. I'm your host, Dr. Tanya Paynter, and today I'm with Dr. Jason Wilson, who wrote a really amazing book. I'm really excited to talk to him called Statistics and Faith. Dr. Wilson has a PhD in statistics from UC Riverside, an MA in New Testament studies at Biola University, and has taught math and statistics at Biola in Southern California for the past 18 years. He's the founding director of Biola's Quantitative Consulting Center. He's published over 20 peer-reviewed journal articles and is the author of Statistics and Faith. In 1996, he had an encounter with God that revealed his life's calling, which includes equipping the American church to more ably fulfill her mission. This is why he teaches, to disciple students unto Jesus Christ. Jason has been married to his wife Natalie for 30 years, and they have two daughters who also live in Southern California. Welcome, Dr. Wilson. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Yeah, and feel free to call me Jason.
All right, sounds good. So, you have a new book came out in May called Statistics and Faith, a Christian Guide to Telling the Truth with Data. And this book was really, really well written. I was so surprised to hear this was your first book. So, congratulations on that. Um, but would you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into statistics? Statistics with New Testament studies seems like about as unusual as a naturopathic doctor with a degree in Christian apologetics. So, how did you come about
Sure.
that unusual combination?
Yeah, well, when I got to college, I had a rocky upbringing and really wanted to kind of figure out what was true and what I believed in my college years. And in my searching, the Lord brought me to Himself in a powerful way
Hmm.
through discovering I think really that Christianity is the religion in world history that is sought for the truth. If you go back all the way to our founding church fathers, that was a high value. It's been true throughout the history of the church. Uh, I encountered people that were worshiping God in sincerity and just showed me something I hadn't seen before. And so I came into college as a math major, and I was a happy math major, enjoying it. But then I encountered, Christ, and I asked myself, do I want to study math, or should I spend my time studying the eternal Word of God?
Hmm.
And I almost gave up the math major in favor of biblical studies and theology, and I wound up getting a double degree. And so from that time in college, I've really kind of had both. And I actually pursued theology and was accepted to a couple of PhD programs in theology.
Hmm.
And as I started down that road, the Lord gave me a series of three divine encounters where He basically said, "I appreciate the zeal, son, but patting me on the head, I want you to go back into math."
Hmm.
And that was a difficult thing to do, but I obeyed, and in so doing, that kind of has brought me to where I'm at today, including this book.
Wow, that's really cool. I'd love to hear more about those divine encounters at some point. So what prompted you to write this book? So statistics and faith, they don't seem to go together normally. So how did you come to the idea of this book?
Yeah, in 2003, I was preparing myself to go into my PhD program at University of California, Riverside. And I had an opportunity to attend the big annual statistics meeting. It's called the Joint Statistics Meeting. About 6,000 statisticians get together at a
Oh,
convention
wow.
center and have a great time. Uh, so I got to go that year thinking it'd be a great thing. It was kind of overwhelming to be there. But one thing that I encountered was a group called at that time, Christian Statisticians Informal Discussion Group.
Hmm.
They had a meeting that evening, about 40 Christian statisticians in the room, and they had a discussion topic that was integrative. It was on this convergence
That's
of
cool.
stats and faith. And that really piqued my interest, as you
Mm.
could imagine, with my background. And I struck up a conversation with one of those guys, and we continued the dialogue over the next few years. And he had an idea for a book project called Statistical Apologetics.
Interesting.
Yeah, really catchy title. That gripped me. And
Mm-hmm.
we talked about co-authoring this book. And I put together materials for him to send to a publisher using some of his stuff, some of my stuff, and he was just too busy to really move forward.
Mm.
So years passed, and my conception of apologetics changed. I reflect this in the concluding chapter of the book, Statistics and Faith. And I think the Lord, it wasn't my time with the Lord back then. And so as he gave me experience and kind of worked with me, and I came to have enough of my own materials, my own thoughts, then in the last, really 4 years ago or so, I got a sabbatical and was able to just kind of put everything together, and that's the book that we're
Wow.
talking about.
So that's been in the making for quite a while then.
It has been, yeah.
Yeah. Well, excellent. So who did you write this book for? Who's going to get the most out of this book? I'll get you
Yes.
you share your opinion and then I'll give my opinion.
Okay, okay, that sounds good. So part of my motive is that I can have something for my students that are taking a formal statistics class, but in the secular textbooks that we use or that they're encountering, I'm always supplementing with
Mm,
material that's faith related. And so students who are taking statistics or who've had statistics and are interested in that integration piece, that's a key piece of my audience. And then anybody else that would be interested in tasting some of that.
mm.
So just educated, interested readers is kind of that second tier.
And for anybody, so I'll be honest, I really don't like math. I am not a math person, and so but the statistics and faith really I was so intrigued because it's just not a combination that you think about, just like most people don't think about medicine and faith and the ways that that impacts our health. And so I got it because I was so interested and read through it. And oh my gosh, so for anybody who is frightened of math or thinks it's going to be overwhelming and statistics is like its own other level, this was so easy. Jason, you did such an amazing job, like just really simplifying it, but not in a speaking down or oversimplifying way. So, yes, you're going to have to stretch your math brain a little bit, but I think that anybody who just has a basic concept of some basic math principles and your faith and understanding how our interpretation of studies and statistics are impacted by our worldview choices, including Christianity or not Christian. You cover a lot of that in the book as well. It just was so easy to read and to grasp. And so I have such a better understanding of, I mean, and I look through studies all the time, right? That's part of my job. But the way that you presented it was just in a very different way that I had heard it before, which made it just a lot of stuff click. So for anybody who's like, well, I don't have any interest in learning about math, that kind of stuff, it's not a very math heavy book. And it has so many great theological points to it that I would really encourage you to think about picking it up and reading through it. I mean, you've got chapters in there about gambling's probabilities, creation, and Jesus and fulfilling prophecy. You've got information in there about COVID, how healing prayer works. So many how society lies to us. I mean, so many different things that are really going to be valuable in a day-to-day way that opens our eyes to the ways that statistics and things can be manipulated if we're not looking out for the things that you teach us to look out for in this book. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there for anybody who's like, well, that might be interesting, but I don't do math. You totally can do this book.
Mhm. Well, I really appreciate you saying that, Tanya. And one thing that I tell my students when they come into my class, let's say an introduction of probability and statistics or another entry-level stats class, I say in the catalog it says MATH, whatever number. I
Hmm.
said, but if we were a research institution, we had a statistics department, this class would say STAT and then the
Hmm.
number, because statistics is not math.
Hmm.
Statistics is like engineering in that it uses math for a purpose,
Right.
but it's about doing something else. It's just
Hmm.
using math. And so I think that's important for people to understand about statistics.
Agreed. And a lot of times you see all these PAs and R's and P's and greater thans, and it's like, what are you talking about? But again, you take those concepts and you break it down in a very easy way. And it was just a good refresher for me too, because my last statistics class was back in med school, like over a decade ago. So I was like, oh
Mm.
yeah, that's right, that's right. Yeah, so I just want to encourage anybody who just don't worry about the math part. It's not really mathy. It's the overall idea behind it and what you're teaching, both from a theological and a statistic standpoint. And I also want to bring up, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but I don't know that I've ever read through somebody who is so unbiased and intellectually honest about the data that you're portraying. I honestly couldn't tell whether you were, for the vaccine or against the COVID vaccine, whether you were for something or against something, because you presented it in such an unbiased way that it made me realize how much we put our own biases into, and you talk about this in the book, put our own biases into the data that we're looking at, and we're interpreting it through that lens, but that it's possible to remove that and
Mm.
just look at the data based on the way that you describe things. And I think that's really important for us to think about as reasoning, logical beings. Like we don't just have to follow through what other people tell us to think about it. We can actually look at the data ourselves and arrange it in such a way that pulls out, the truth from the lies or the manipulation. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, wow. I think you articulated that quite well. One of the themes that I'm trying to pull through the book, the subtitle is A Christian Guide to Telling the Truth with Data. And part of the faith integration that I'm doing is as believers, we're concerned about truth, right?
Hmm.
And so in our search for truth, we have all this theological knowledge. We have the Word of God, which is, I would say, inerrant, infallible.
Hmm.
Um, and we have other disciplines where there's things to learn because all truth is God's truth, but yet there's so much misinformation out there. There's different belief systems, and it can be confusing to kind of sort through things. Well,
Hmm.
statistics then becomes a tool. Wherever there's data, using the data, you can pierce through to get at what's really going on in the world. That's what
Hmm.
statistics is really about. And so describing how it's used as a tool and just what its key parts are, there's really just four key parts. So once you have an idea of what they are and then a little experience in how to think with them, then I found that people that have read it have gained confidence in their ability to, oh yeah, I can actually kind of pick through some of that stuff. Even though I may
Hmm.
not know and understand all those details, I feel like I can do that a lot better just having spent a little time in that way. Uh, so I think it's using the tool to go into that data, and because statistics uses you got to look at how the data is collected,
Mhm.
and there's some issues with that. Once you've got that, then the mathematics tell us within the right range of variation if we are getting at the truth or not. So there's a
Mhm.
mathematical basis to this, and that's what helps us to get out of our bias is by using these steps that are, uh, tried and true to get outside the bias through the data. It's not universal that can be used anywhere, but where there's data, then we can use it as a tool to kind of peel off that bias. And I think as believers, that helps us to grow and to have this valuable tool that can help us ourselves see when we are biased.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I think that's pretty cool.
That was actually something that really struck me as I was reading it. I was like, just here, I in my head I call it intellectual honesty, right? You're not
Mm,
cherry picking things to support. There's no confirmation bias. You're literally looking at all ranges because you're interested in the numbers. Like you want to see how this all plays out and just looking at it honestly. And it made me think there are definitely times where I'm kind of cherry picking to make my point. And I'm like, okay, I need to be better about that sometimes. Like let's look at all the data. We don't have to try to present our side is better because that's where we start seeing that division that's spreading, right? And then we start alienating other people. And so that was actually a really like a heart check for me is thinking
mm.
about the way that I'm interpreting data and is it really unbiased? And so you provided a great model for someone to look up to for that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I struggle with the exact same thing.
Yeah,
So
I think we all do, right?
we
We're
all do,
humans.
yes.
Yeah, we want to be
Yeah.
right, dang it. Um, so you mentioned truth just a minute ago, and so that was one of the topics I wanted to talk to you about because one thing that really struck me. So you talked about the three dimensions of truth, and then you said what they were: propositional, experiential, and communal. So can you just review really quickly because I think this is really important, an important idea about truth, especially when we get relative truth and objective truth and subjective truth and trying to weed through all of that. So can you share a little bit about those three dimensions?
Sure. Yeah, that really emerged as I was writing. I've studied philosophy, I've studied theology, and I know those ideas are kind of bouncing around out there. But I've always been struck by Jesus' saying in John chapter 14, verse 6, where he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And as an undergraduate, I loved philosophy, and you learn kind of the classic definition of philosophy that knowledge is true, justified belief, and that's completely propositional. Where a proposition is just a statement that can be true or false. In other words, it's purely conceptual. It's cognitive. You could write it into a computer.
Hmm.
Uh, And Jesus says, I am the truth. Okay, so if truth is just propositions, then that really doesn't make sense. And so you just instinctively get there's just something more going on. And then as we pursue, he reveals in chapter 17, verse 3, his great high priestly prayer, that but basically he's a person. And so there's a personal dimension to truth. And when you start to read all the verses about truth, you realize it's not just all propositional. So there's more going on. Okay, so yes, there's a propositional dimension to truth, and that's the written words that can be true or false, and that give us guidance, and we reason about them. It's wonderful. But yeah, as a person, there's an experiential dimension. We share something together, maybe including those propositions, but it transcends mere propositions. And so there is an experiential dimension, ultimately, that is manifested in a person who was the logos, the very paradigm of the created order. Um, and then that communal dimension is it's about how society itself is structured and connected together. And when everything is operating in the way that it's supposed to, then That's that truth that the people are living and cohering together. Um, and when somebody lies,
Hmm.
then they're not just saying a false proposition, but they're breaking something that's been between that
Hmm.
relationship. Uh, and and so it goes beyond just a proposition, but it's actually affecting the social fabric. And so
And
those are
also
the
impacts the experience that that person is
it
having
it
with somebody
does.
else. Yeah.
Yeah. And so all three are connected, but you can kind of peel them apart a little bit, and all three are manifested in the scripture. And I've found that different cultures of the world tend to kind of gravitate towards one of them. I think you'll find them all, but we tend to gravitate towards some, and as do different religions as well. Uh, and so that's a kind of a
Yeah.
cursory overview.
Yeah. And that's great. And that kind of sheds a little light into how dangerous it can be to swing in one dimension or the other and kind of to the exclusion of some of the other dimensions. So in the book, you use the example of the propositional, uh, where people are just, it's black and white, yes or no kind of thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm saying this incorrectly. But then you have the other people who swing more towards the experiential, who are, truth is relative, and my truth, it can be different than your truth. And so then we start seeing kind of things getting obscured and that kind of thing. Um, did I summarize that okay?
Yeah, I think that's right. Um, because there really is a sense in which it sometimes things depend on your different perspectives,
Right.
right? And so, if you were to take the different perspectives, then what maybe on the surface of it, the immediate propositions might contradict, but once you put it into a broader framework, then they're actually not contradicting. Uh,
So
and,
truth
and,
isn't
and
always just an easy, like black and white, I'm right, you're wrong kind of thing. There's often degrees, not degrees to truth per se, but there's ways to find where that nugget of truth is coming in an imperfect
I think
group.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And statistics clearly tilts propositional, right?
Hmm.
Because we're doing mathematical calculations. So we have to take some context, translate it into something mathematical that we can actually run calculations on, and then translate it back. So there's always this reduction that's occurring. It's very propositional. But when you do that, you are working in a real world context
Hmm.
where there is a community
Hmm.
and there are social relations. And so doing that process is touching on the other dimensions of truth, even with something as clearly propositional as statistics. And an example that I show in the book is in the time of the founding of statistics, some of the key uh, founding fathers of statistics, namely Sir Francis Galton, Carl Pearson, R.A. Fisher, they became some of the leading thinkers behind the eugenics movement, which is basically a form of scientific racism.
Hmm.
And so they were advocating that we should make public policy to kind of promote evolution. Basically, some races are more or less fit than others, and so we should have
Hmm.
public policy that focuses maybe not fully towards races, but at least towards people with more desirable characteristics and suppress those with less desirable characteristics, which
Hmm.
is a horrible thing.
Yeah.
But you see where there's a social context that they're doing their work, then that is basically completely guided by their, I would say, faulty worldview.
Hmm.
And they're coming up with these statistics, these clean propositions to then go and attack this social fabric. And there was some real damage done.
Yeah.
And it's such a dark period that it's often scrubbed from history. And
Hmm.
some of your readers or some of our audience may not have even heard of it. I didn't even hear
No.
about it until, um, I don't know, maybe more the last decade it started really kind of hitting me, even if I'd heard the word before.
Yeah, right. Huh. Well, and that was one of the things that I was thinking about when you had mentioned the categories in the quantitative data. And by that you mentioned the data is either numbers or categories. And the example you used for categories was male, female. But then there are people who keep adding into that category based on their definition of truth. Does that throw a wrench in the works? Is there a problem from a statistics standpoint or
Yeah, so you're right. To the degree that, and I don't know what the current state of the US Census is on how they frame the question about sex and the people in the household that's filling out the census form. Um, but uh, but at some point there was a shift, right? And
hmm
so when you take this shift and you move from a binary male female category and then you add another category, whether it's other or more than one category, whatever you do,
hmm
well, to then compare against the prior data, uh, you now have inserted a point of disjunction. And
Yeah,
so
like
past
another
that,
variable?
well, another option inside of that particular categorical variable,
Okay.
right? And so everybody was classified as either male, female up to a certain point, and then you have this shift. And
hmm
so to compare before that, then your comparison is not going to be completely apples to apples like it had been prior.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, and that's just something that you've got to wrestle with in the data. Uh, and there's things you can try to do to work that out, but that's going to have to be dealt with. And that's kind of a small example, but I feel like that was
Right.
along the line of what you were going.
Right, right. I just was wondering how that's going to or does change how we can use the data that we get from it and all that kind of stuff. So you kind of it just kind of muddies the water, it sounds like. And so there's a little bit more work to try to figure out exactly what the numbers are telling us when things shift like that.
That's right. And the standard thing that would be done in a case like that is you'll have to make some assumptions
hmm
and state what they are, and then run your calculation based on the assumptions. For example, you could take let's say, all the non-binary responses, and you could hold those aside and just compare just the males females versus prior males females with the census data.
Mm,
You could make an assumption about the prior male-female data, and we impute some percentage of those to be non-binary
okay.
and calculate that. And then you're adjusting the past data to sort of try to match it to the present and make a little comparison. You'll just have to make your assumptions explicit and perform said calculations.
Got it. So it doesn't sound like it's a huge problem for someone who knows what he's doing. It just sounds like it's really confusing to someone like me.
And it adds more assumptions. So
Yeah.
every time you're adding these assumptions, then you are making your final results a little bit harder to sell to everybody
Okay.
because they're going to have to go through those assumptions and check and see, well, do I believe all these assumptions? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so it makes it more complicated to explain as well.
Okay. Okay. So, so then how can we filter our data through our faith to come to a rational interpretation of the data without judging others or who don't hold that same worldview? Do you see that is this kind of where you see arguments in quotes between people of that are interpreting the data differently? So with different world, is it usually because of the worldviews and maybe even perhaps an agenda that they might have to have it swing one way or another?
Gotcha. Well, that's the point at which I appreciated your stating that you've you couldn't pick up my view on different things
hmm
because of how I presented that. That's the place where I think if you want to just kind of put your statistics hat on, so to speak, and try to use that process and withhold our own judgments and biases. Now, of course, we can't completely do that. But statistics gives us a way to, I think, really help us in
Hmm.
that regard. And I think that's where, as believers, we can be helped as well. And this is one where you're not merely, you're not just giving up your own beliefs or your own worldview, but it allows you to kind of step back and then work through a process that you can still critically judge and evaluate, but you can do so from the standpoint of an objective process.
Hmm.
And so that's when we come in, and then you've got the four parts of statistics: collect, organize, analyze, and interpret the data. And I talked some about how we go about those
Hmm.
and some of the key questions that we can ask when we encounter each of those four parts in a specific study. And so we can ask ourselves those questions. And when we get the positive answers, like, yeah, that looks like it's checking out, it's kind of passing muster, so to speak, then we can kind of keep moving forward. If we get one like, wait a minute, uh, they said they did an experiment, but I see this piece here. Maybe in their particular treatment, it looks like they didn't actually have control over that, and that violates the experimental design. And so, if their design is flawed, uh, then that throws into question the results that they're
Hmm.
coming up with. And how big of a deal is that? Then you might have to go into that question, but it gives you a little flag to check on how we think their work has gone.
And you have a couple of examples scattered throughout the book of
Yeah,
this process, and yeah.
yeah, trying to walk readers
Hmm.
through that. And so that's how to sort of put your statistics hat on, so to speak, and do that objective process.
Yeah, that one of the things that I was surprised. So, I'd love for you to just briefly outline Peter Stoner's work for the listeners, because I encountered him when I was going through my master's and
Hmm.
found his study fascinating. And then you kind of said you disagree with his what he came up with, and you gave a really valid reason why. Can you share a little bit? So that I think this is a good example in action of what you're talking about, of removing any biases and just looking at the data and making sure that it's all being done in a scientific manner. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Gotcha. Sure. Yeah. So Peter Stoner, he taught a course. I don't remember exactly what the name of the course was, but he would have his students, and this is at a secular school. So I have really high regard for Peter Stoner and the work that he did. Um, he would ask his students to come up with a probability that eight particular prophecies in the Old Testament would be fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. And and he would basically have them talk about why they came up with the particular probability, and they wanted to use a conservative approach. So they would land on the largest probabilities that they would feel comfortable with. And they came up with all eight of them, and using a thing called the multiplication rule in probability theory. You multiply those probabilities together to get the probability that all eight of them would occur in the same, in this case, the same person of Jesus Christ. And you get a really small number.
Hmm.
It's so small that it would be like if you covered the state of Texas 2 feet thick with silver dollars, good old American silver dollars, uh, and then you marked one, and then somebody randomly placed it inside the state of Texas, and then you sent somebody blindfolded, and they got to pick one silver dollar. What are the chances that they would find the marked one? That's the how likely it is, and it's essentially impossible. And so the conclusion then is that it's it's divine revelation. God gave these prophecies. It's too unlikely that they would be given and then uh, their
Fulfilled by the same
fulfillment.
person.
Yeah, that they wouldn't. Yeah, for them to be fulfilled by the same person that wasn't divinely inspired.
Hmm.
And so, uh, so the math part's legitimate, but the place that I have a question is the independence of all eight. In order for the multiplication rule to go through, they have to be independent of one another. In other words, disconnected. And I talk through those particular eight and find that actually several of them are not independent.
Hmm.
And so I find that as a flaw in Stoner's argument. Now, again, I love the idea. I think it could be rehabilitated. In fact, I was at a conference just last month where it just so happened that there was a two scholars that were there, and they presented a paper that I had the opportunity to review. And they were trying to do kind of an alternative argument in the spirit of Peter Stoner. And I critiqued their paper in the same as I did Stoner's.
Mm.
And they fixed all the problems.
Oh,
And they solved their independence issue and kind of buttressed it and really strengthened. I think they improved Stoner's work. And yeah, so I think that can certainly be done. But that was the issue about stoners.
yeah. And you also said something too where it has to be very specific, like you have to be able to tell that it was actually fulfilled, like very specific. Wasn't there a piece to that as well? And that only, I think you said only one of them, like Jesus being born in Bethlehem was like the
Yeah,
only specific,
you're right. Yes,
verifiable.
yeah. There's a specificity issue as well. If you're talking about a prophecy, then uh, it could, of course, it's clear to see, oh yeah, these things were fulfilled by Jesus, but could they have been fulfilled by somebody else at a different time? So there's a specificity issue. And yeah, when you say Bethlehem, that's that really nails it.
Yeah,
That
very
puts you,
specific.
yeah, in Israel, in a very specific village there in Israel. But some of the other prophecies were not so specific as that.
Like holes in the hands, right? Hands being pierced.
Yeah, that
Many other people could have had their hands being pierced, is what kind of what you were saying with that,
Yeah,
right?
the presumption is crucifixion, but there are other ways to have pierced hands.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then,
So,
and that also kind of brings up like when you were giving the example of they were not separate, the piercing of the hands, and then one of them was also that he was crucified. Well, if you're crucified, you're going to have pierced hands. So that's what you were talking about with them not being separated.
yeah, not independent from
Yes,
each other.
independent. Right,
Yes. Yeah,
right.
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
So in that same chapter, you were talking about the statistics around creation or the probabilities of creation being from either creation as a divinely orchestrated event or the abiogenesis, where just life spontaneously arose. And I find this line of thinking so fascinating that I would love to just kind of cover it really quickly. So you put the probability of life arising spontaneously from non-life at about 1 in 10 to the 2,930. First of all, do you have an example of how impossible this is from a probability standpoint? Like, like with the silver dollars in Texas, can you just help us to visualize how big of a number that is?
wow. It's really difficult to do that.
It's
And,
so
and,
big that you can't come up with a valid example.
it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically impossible. Like one just one idea that would throw it out like this, what I'm going to describe to you is just vastly more likely to occur than that event. And the event that I'm describing, I made so many simplifying assumptions.
You did.
Real life is actually way harder than that.
Yep.
But Fred Hoyle came up with this analogy, and he said that consider a junkyard uh, that's got a whole bunch, a very large junkyard, very large, miles wide. It's got lots of parts and stuff, and a whirlwind comes into that junkyard and spins, and it pulls a bunch of parts, and they shape themselves into a Boeing 747 aircraft jumbo jet fueled, engine running, with a cup of hot coffee steaming on the dashboard. Uh, it's more likely for that to happen than it would be for that simple single-celled organism to come to be,
Wow. Based on the probability, based on the
based on the
numbers.
probability
Yeah.
calculations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit of research because I didn't even know if you could come up with something from that large of a number. But scientists estimate that there are 10 to the 80 atoms in the entire universe, and the number that you came up with is 10 to the 2,930. So I can't even do the math of how many more times larger that. I mean, that to me really put that in perspective. Although I like your example too, that that is more probable than life spontaneously arising. So I find it fascinating that we can use, math and numbers to kind of outline the fact that that's really kind of a crazy thought to think that life could have arisen without some sort of design or intended purpose behind it. Do you have any idea of how scientists, I mean, have you heard being in the math world, how scientists reconcile that impossible probability around abiogenesis? Have you heard anything? Because I've never actually heard a naturalist or, an atheist address that. And that might just be a lack of my own knowledge, but
Yeah, a good reference to read on this, I think a current text is by Stephen Meyer, and it's
mhm.
called The Return of the God
Mm,
Hypothesis.
I have it. I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay, yeah. So it's good. So one of the things that he's going to talk about, I'm going to put this in my own language. I'm not trying to say that he said exactly what I'm saying. Um, but the people who are materialists, naturalists, who do not believe that God created and that the universe is all that there is, this is a true problem. This is a true problem. And so in the earlier days, they tried to argue that the universe was infinite, infinite
Hmm.
length time. We've always been here. And so that gave you enough, like, yeah, it's super improbable, but the universe just been around long enough that eventually it's got to happen.
Hmm.
Well, when the Big Bang Theory came in and got established, that pretty much took that off the table. And so now the universe is finite. And as you pointed out, you got 10 to the 80th powered particles. Well, if you take a 20 billion year universe and you take the fastest possible time that the chemical reactions could occur, which is Planck time, it's about 10 to the ninth power. Okay, so that's like a billion reactions a second. All the particles occurring are transacting a billion times a second in the universe for 20 billion years. That's only around like 10 to the 1, I don't know, 130, 140, 150, something like that. Well, we're talking about 10 to the negative 2000 and something on
Mm,
that simplest celled organism.
yeah.
And so there's just not enough uh, resources in the universe to get this thing off the ground. So uh, they're going to then posit something like uh, panspermia. Some of them go aliens seeded it, or somehow life was seeded from another place. I don't know if you're familiar with the Marvel, the Marvel
Hmm.
Cinematic Universe. Okay,
The
uh,
multiverse. Yep.
the multiverse. So that's a scientific theory. So they're pulling that from a scientific theory, multiverses, where you just have all these different multiverses going on, and so we happen to be in the one that the things really happen. There's an thinkable number of sort of dead or really lame multiverses in that theory. The problem with that theory is we just don't have any evidence for it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so
Yep.
there's you got an evidential problem. You also have uh, Stephen Meyer points this out, that not only do you have an evidence problem, but you also have to have, if you have a bunch of multiverses, then you have a multiverse generating mechanism,
Hmm.
which itself is even arguably more complicated than a universe itself. And
Right.
so that just kicks the can down the road. So does the panspermia theory, and that kicks the can down the road.
Yeah, where did the aliens come from?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And so it keeps coming back to an original creator.
right. And now the latest that I've heard is the black hole theory, that we're actually our universe was created from a black hole.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. I've not heard about that one. But that
it's
that still doesn't address
it doesn't
the
because it's supposedly a black hole from another universe. So we're kind of back to that other universe theory.
multiverse theory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So um yeah, so I found that pretty awesome evidence for for intelligent design, at least, right, from the
Mhm.
math standpoint. So that was really good. So one of the things that really stood out to me, so in chapter 6, you talked about COVID and the statistics around that. And one thing that I really loved is you had on one side of the spectrum, you had the alarmist, who was the person who thought, and I'm paraphrasing, you didn't say it this way, but the person who thought that COVID was going to kill everybody, we needed to protect everybody from society, everybody should be locked down, like, that person. And then you have the denialist who was completely the opposite. Oh, it's just a bad cold. Everybody just calm down. Like, we don't need vaccines. We don't need any kind of protection, nothing. Okay. So you've got the two ends of the spectrum. And one of the things that I really loved about this chapter was that you're like, there's actually evidence for both sides of the camp, but it's not for either one of those extremes. And so we have to find ways to kind of come into the middle and be a little bit more realistic about, no, the world isn't going to end because COVID's going to kill everybody, and no, COVID is killing people, so you can't just completely ignore it, kind of thing. And so I loved the approach that you took on that. Could you talk a little bit about what you found on the studies as far as vaccine efficacy? This would be a good example of kind of the two extremes, and the evidence kind of lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. To make it really simple, I found that there were studies, and the my editor was very nervous
I'm
about
sure.
even the idea of including a chapter on COVID. And I pitched her my concept, which was let's just locate the state of knowledge in, I think we went for July 2021,
Right.
and just have it like it's up to that specific time,
Yep.
and just go by what does the literature say, so that I'm not talking about my specific views or some other individual specific views, but just kind of what was the state of the art at that time
And this was one
from
of the places that I
from the
thought you did
literature.
such an excellent job of not having one camp or the other. Like, I couldn't tell where you fell in your beliefs around whether it worked or not because you just looked at the data and what the data suggested.
Yeah, and I think that that's an example of that fruit that we can get from the objectivity of statistics.
Exactly.
Um, so so basically, yeah, there were studies that they were coming out that were showing that people who were taking the vaccine, there was a lower incidence of cases of COVID with people with the vaccine, and over time, it decreased the efficacy of it, meaning
Hmm.
that as you went out longer, like once you start getting past 10 months of vaccine dosage, then they're starting to be equal to people without the vaccine and people who had not had COVID before, just kind of
Hmm.
equal rate as fresh exposure. Okay, so that was evidence then for the moving in the alarmist direction.
Hmm.
Uh, but then I also looked at what about natural immunity? If you didn't have a vaccine, but you got COVID and you recover, and then you're exposed to COVID again. So there were some studies that were coming out on natural immunity, and natural immunity also uh, gave resistance to future COVID incidents, and it was more durable. So it was lasting longer than vaccine efficacy, and it was also at a higher level. And so I took the studies, and I couldn't find a study that did the whole thing. And so I made some of my own. I made a graph that showed, that
Hmm.
plotted them together and showing that.
Yeah. And so that was great. So then your point was that both camps have evidence to show that their stance is not incorrect. And so then that just in my head, I was just thinking, why were we arguing so much then? Like, why
Mm.
was there so much hate between the vaxxers and the anti-vaxxers? And it's just like everybody can just choose what they're most comfortable with based on their lifestyle and their exposure risks and their health risks and all of that. And I think that's what the evidence supported. Like there was maybe stronger immunity up front for the vaccine people, and there was stronger immunity at the end after, for the innate immunity after for the non-vaxxers. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, and that's a message that can offer some hope to people in a polarized environment,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And so that's the kind of thing where statistics then can be this tool that can help to kind of come in as a little bit of a referee and help to settle a debate
Yeah.
and kind of bring the temperature down, so to
And
speak.
and I
And
hear
and
all the
that's a
time,
biblical value that
right,
we have. And so
right.
that's an integration piece. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I hear a lot is, what am I supposed to believe? I see research about this and that, these arguments, and I see research on the other end of the spectrum on this argument, and it's like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like this, and it's like that's true. Like we get so confused because there's so many different polarizing viewpoints, and there is research to back it up on both sides. But if we were to look at overall, like you did with the vaccine issue, you can see, well, the truth really lies somewhere in the middle, and it's not one or the other. Usually, if it's overwhelmingly one or the other, then most reasonable people are going to not try to take the stance of something that doesn't make any sense and isn't backed up by the data.
Yeah. And sometimes they can be pitted as like as mutually exclusive when
Right,
actually they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
right.
And so when you get into a little bit of that nuance, you can help see, oh yeah, actually they're in cases talking about different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can also be a way to unify things.
Yeah. And that's always been, I mean, naturopathic medicine is all about the individual, right? Yes, we have treatments that are going to work for the population in general, but
Mm.
you're a unique individual. So what's going to make the most sense for you, for your health journey, for, your risk factors, your genetic makeup, all of that. And medicine really needs to be tailored to the individual.
Amen. Yeah, well said.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I still have a whole bunch of notes. I would love to sit here and keep chatting with you forever, Jason. But where can people find your book? Where can they find more about you? And if they have questions.
Yeah, so the book is at Amazon and Barnes and Noble, other retailers. It's Statistics and Faith. The InterVarsity Press website has it, and if you happen to teach statistics, then you can get a free review or desk copy by going to their website. Uh, I'm easy to find if you just Google my name, Jason Wilson Biola, then you can find my webpage. It's linked on Biola's website. It's also just out there, and you could read more about me and my other publications.
Wonderful. Well, we'll have all of those linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about it. Anybody who thought that some of this is fascinating, even if you didn't necessarily, the book is so good that I would really, really encourage you to check it out, learn about how statistics and faith do work together. And thanks for joining us. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please subscribe for more topics like this, where we focus on bringing our faith and health together for a whole you. If you have questions around your health or your faith, including doubts and struggles with what you've been taught about God, we'd love to have you send us an email at support@psalmmedical.com.